All right, so I want to go over the information that is going to be on the quiz for Friday, January 13th. It will cover cell theory and parts, um, and then also cellular transport. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and do some review here. Remember, cells are the smallest unit that can carry on functions of life. Prokaryotics and eukaryotics are the two types of cells that we talked about. And remember, prokaryote are simpler cells. And the big difference between a prokaryote and a eukaryote is the prokaryote does not have a nucleus. You're going to have to be able to look at different images and be able to tell me what is represented. And I will also give you the concept of it. For instance, ribosomes is the cell part that makes proteins. They're the small dots. They could be located either on the rough endoplasmic reticulum or free in the cytoplasm. I could point to the nucleus. It's a large center in the large center mass organelle in the middle of the cell usually. It's what the DNA is held in, and it's the brain of the of the cell. Remember that osmosis is the process that moves water molecules across the plasma membrane. Bacteria cells, remember, are an example of prokaryotic cells, and they do not have a nucleus. They will have a cell membrane. They can reproduce, usually through asexual reproduction, and they do have means to move or a method of locomotion. When you look at eukaryotic cells versus prokaryotic cells, what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot more detail, a lot more organelles inside of the eukaryotic cell. And the big difference between a plant cell eukaryotic cell and an animal cell eukaryotic cell is the animal eukaryotic cell is more free form. It's not geometric. It won't have a large central vacuole where the plant cell will. Some structures that are found both in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells are the cell membrane, ribosomes, cytoplasm, things like that. Again, your plant cell versus your animal cell. The plant cell is going to have that large central vacuole. It's going to have a cell wall, and it's also going to have chloroplast, where the animal cell will not. But the animal cell will have centrioles and lysosomes versus the plant cell not having that. Again, many of the plants have a single large, what we call central vacuole. It's filled up with fluid. It's used for storage. It also gives turgor pressure to the plant, which allows it to stand up. Exocytosis is when a vesicle in the cell is going to fuse with the cell membrane, and the cell membrane is going to release the contents to the outside. Carbon dioxide and water are converted into glucose in the mitochondria. That's the process of, carbon dioxide and water are converted into glucose or food for the plant in the chloroplast. The mitochondria then takes the glucose and is going to break that down with the presence of oxygen to create cellular respiration, the process of cellular respiration, and that produces ATP for us. The cellular process in which materials are moved across a membrane of area of low concentration to an area of high concentration, that's active transport. Remember, active transport requires extra energy and goes against the concentration gradient, so from a low area to a high area. Chloroplast is where we have photosynthesis happening in a plant. Cellular respiration is where is it located in the mitochondria, and that happens in both plants and animals, and that's where we get our cellular energy. A red blood cell, when we talked about the hypotonic, hypertonic, isotonic solutions, remember we are referring to osmosis when we look at what kind of concentration salt solution would be with a passive process. Remember, osmosis, facilitated diffusion, and diffusion are all passive transport. They don't need any extra energy, and they go from an area of high to low concentration. Um, the plant cell, again, when we talk about photosynthesis, again, it has to have some kind of energy to produce that glucose. So it needs light energy, and that happens again in the chloroplast. When we look at the rough endoplasmic reticulum versus the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, the rough endoplasmic reticulum is covered with ribosomes, which allows it to help with protein synthesis and the movement of proteins, whereas the smooth is not covered with ribosomes. And again, it helps with lipid production and movement. The only two structures that are found in the plant cell will be cell walls and chloroplasts. Again, you can see some vacuoles in animal cells. They're just not as common, and they are not large central like they are in a plant cell. Passive transport across a membrane, again, that is your diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis. When we talk about cell theory, remember cell theory states that all cells come from a pre-existing cell. Cells are the basic structure of life, and all living organisms are created from cells. Homeostasis is affected, or would be affected, mostly by the cell membrane. Remember, because the cell membrane is what allows things in and out of the cell. Remember, ribosomes create proteins, so if we did not have ribosomes, we would not be able to create proteins. When we look at how does the vacuole in an animal differ from the vacuole in the plant cell, the plant cell is going to have the large central vacuole, and the vacuole in the animal cell is going to be very small. There'll probably be more than one in the cell, but they're very small, and they don't help with the pressure because the animal cell has a cytoskeleton, so it doesn't need that structure much like what a plant cell does. Again, the powerhouse of the cell is the mitochondria, and it's the site of cellular respiration. If we were to do that into a city, in a city analogy there, remember when we did the cell city model, the power company or anything that produces energy would be what we would call the mitochondria. Big difference between mitochondria and chloroplasts is mitochondria produce water from oxygen, while chloroplasts produce oxygen from water through the processes. So what are the products of cellular respiration? Is water and ATP, whereas chloroplast produces oxygen and glucose from water. Gases, when we talk about gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, they can cross the plasma membrane by passive diffusion through the lipid bilayer. New cells are created from other cells. That's cell theory. Pre-existing cells, that's what we're talking about. Transport into a cell against concentration gradient, meaning going from a low to a high, requires energy. Remember the ATP, that's what we call active transport. Plant cell will remain unchanged in size and shape when it's kept in a solution. What kind of solution is that? Remember, if the cell does not change, it doesn't swell or it doesn't shrink, that is an isotonic solution. If it shrinks, it will be in a hypertonic solution. If it swells up, it would be in a hypotonic solution. During diffusion, molecules move again from a high concentration to a low concentration. We call that going with the concentration gradient. Active transport occurs in cells when, for example, we have the sodium potassium pump at work. Any process that involves active transport is going to involve movement of molecules from a lower to higher concentration, and it's also going to require energy to make that happen. Cell theory states that all living things are made of cells. Again, cells are the basic structure unit of life, and that all cells come from pre-existing cells. So those are the things that you need to be looking at. You can look over the Quizlet live cards for cellular transport and also for cell parts. And again, if you have any questions, make sure that you try to get a hold of me this week, and I will try to answer anything I can on through email. So have a good week.